Okay. Good. Yeah. Great. So, folks, thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Parker Gallagher. I am an informal advisor to the board. I've got a background in real estate development for those who don't know me. And so I've been helping the board on and off over the years with what do we do about our pool project. So as you know from the letter that you all received, tonight's meeting is with Fraser Forbes. And we have Steve and Tom who will introduce themselves. Fraser Forbes is and they'll describe their firm in more detail, but Fraser Forbes potentially could be an owner's representative for us, meaning that they would perform functions that the board doesn't feel that it's qualified to perform, doesn't feel it has the expertise to perform, doesn't feel it has the time to perform. So if we're going to go forward with this project, who does all the things representing our interests, ours as in the Vantage Hill community's interests. And so, as you saw in the letter, the board has chosen a path to engage and involve the community so that we all can learn about what the options are, what we might do with a firm like Fraser Forbes. And so we're here tonight to learn and hear and chat. I'm hoping that this is informal. I've sort of set it up with them. We all know what we're going to talk about. It's similar to the list of things that I took the board through with each of the law firms that we went and interviewed when we were contemplating that as a course of action. And it really is for us to just have a conversation with these folks about what they might be able to do for us, what they think of our situation, and things like that. If it's okay with you, I'm going to lead because I've got a lot of expertise. I know how these folks work because I've been there, and so I think I can save their time and make it effective for everyone if I sort of get the conversation going. And then, of course, there's going to be an opportunity for us all to ask questions as time goes on. For those of you who may not have been engaged in this process so far, I refer to you in the letter to the Walsh-Colucci report, which was 19 pages of findings and commentary from the ownership community about what the ownership community thinks of doing something with the pool site. So there's a lot of great information in that document that covers a lot of ground. And I think you would find yourselves really empowered if you read through that and got your arms around some of the commentary and some of the ideas and some of the process that Walsh-Colucci, the board paid for Walsh to lay out for the community so we all would know what's going on. So if you're coming into this and you know nothing about this and this is sort of your first exposure, you'll hear some stuff tonight, but there's another resource for you posted on the First Residential website that really can give you a good orientation to sort of some of the work that's happened so far. So with that, how about we get going? So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do at Fraser Forbes, and then we'll hear a little bit about what your firm does.
Okay, great, thanks. My name is Steve Caniglio. I've been at Fraser Forbes about 3 years. Before that, I was with a couple different private equity groups, including Westbrook Partners and Goldman Sachs. And before that, I started the division of KP Home here in the Mid-Atlantic, and I was with Pulte Homes. Some of my projects, I did Potomac Yards. I don't know if you're familiar with Potomac Yards. I built that new bridge over Route 1. That was really fun. Up in Maryland, it's a project called Crown Farm. If you ever go up there, it's next to Washingtonian and Rio. If you ever go up there, it's cool restaurants, kind of a mixed-use community. What I do at Fraser Forbes, well, let me back up and just talk about Fraser Forbes in general. We started, I think this is our 21st year or something, we started as a brokerage firm. And interestingly, the guys from Fraser Forbes covered me when I was at Pulte. I bought land for Pulte. And primarily brokerage, Maryland, Virginia, DC. About 20% of their revenue over the life of the company has been for multifamily projects. Almost all of it has been greenfield development, and by that I mean, ground up, building stuff. The last couple of years, we've started doing more redevelopment, just as some of the buildings get older. Right now, a couple of years ago, we saw a hole in the market. You know, when the downturn happened, all these builders and private equity funds and developers, they couldn't afford the really smart land people that could buy land, entitle land, you know, get it through the process, develop land, so on and so forth. So they started cutting back. Actually, Tom here is a great example of that. They can't afford Tom. Tom came from Winchester Homes, and Winchester Homes got sold, and they couldn't afford all the smart old people. So,
Thank you so
Sadly, it's fact.
what we did was we started a consulting division, and with the goal to help groups that aren't, I don't mean this in a bad way, at all, real estate savvy. Because, you know, if you don't do this every day, you have no chance of knowing the ins and outs of various jurisdictions and stuff. Plus, the laws keep changing, and it's kind of a little bit like, you know, being the field goal kicker, they keep moving the goalposts. It's not fair. So we started with helping folks out with just basic valuations. You know, sometimes appraisers can get kind of expensive. We do it cheaper, faster, and get to the same answer, probably a better answer. We started working with folks getting stuff through the entitlement process in various counties, and then, you know, we can literally take a project from trees all the way to paving the streets. And I'll let Tom speak for himself, but this is what Tom did for a couple of years, and this is what I did. So, you know, we know how to do it, and it's hard. It's a small world of people that do this, and everybody knows one another. So, you know, when we talk about lawyers and stuff like that, you know, you look at Reston, there's like 3 lawyers you'd ever call. You know, Greg Regal would probably be my favorite in Reston. Looney over there at Cooley, or the Walsh Gallucci folks. And I saw Walsh Gallucci did your little the paper that I read through, which was very interesting, by the way. And I think
we'll talk about that in a little bit.
I think they sort of got to the right kind of place. But you know, what we're here to do is just answer questions, and you know, with respect to being an owner's rep and stuff like that. We do this for other groups, and interestingly, most of the clients that hire us are the more sophisticated groups, because they know that what we can do and what we've done in the past. And interestingly, the folks that need us the most, and some of the national home builders that you would think know what they're doing, some of these guys are totally lost. They don't hire us, but the Folger Pratts of the world, you know, Pulte Homes, D.R. Horton, those guys hire us. It's the world's kind of upside down. Right now we're doing a really large project not too far from you guys. If you know where the Wheelie Avenue Metro is, on the other side of the toll road from you, where all those associations are. So right now, they hired us about a year ago to start with, you know, tell them what they can do and what their property's worth. And then, okay, if this is what it's worth, how do we get from where we're at to getting that money? And a lot of it isn't just, you know, I'm going to go put a for sale sign on it and someone's going to write me a big check. You know, it's the structure of that transaction. You know, it's kind of the nuts and bolts of it are often as important as the money and the timing. So they hired us to do that, and then after we did that, they got together and said, you know what, we'd like to hire you guys to now market and sell this. And then ultimately, we'll represent them, kind of the same sort of owner's rep sort of scenario, as they go through the process. You get, I liken the entitlement world to golf.
And by entitlement, just because some folks may not understand, what you're really talking about is you're talking about the permitting process to get a project through to a permit.
Yes. Whether it's rezoning, in this case, they talk about the PRC stuff, but so it's just like a bet on the golf course. You win or lose on the first tee. You know, when you're sitting there with a guy you're playing, trying to figure out how many strokes you're going to get, that's when the game's over. And that's where we can really help. We can do our best to make sure you can win on the first tee.
Great, and I think we're going to talk a little more about it in detail about what that might look like for us. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Tom Berg. I was originally trained as an architect, practiced in Georgetown. It was a small firm. Went to the Rouse Company, worked on Columbia, which is sort of the Reston of Maryland. I guess you'd say the new town up there. Went from there as a commercial developer in DC, and then finally on to Winchester for 22 years. Then they were sold, as we said, and restructured their whole operation and greatly reduced it, so it wasn't fun anymore. So I was able to retire and then 3 months later join Fraser Forbes. So it's a good group. I think it's important to realize that they're here as owners' representatives. We wouldn't be developing the project, we wouldn't be buying it, we would answer to the board, to the citizens, to the residents, so as we move through the process. And my experience with Winchester, I headed up the Maryland acquisition, so projects over there you probably haven't heard of so much, the Indian Spring Country Club, the Clarksburg, the I-270 corridor, major projects up there. And then Winchester, of course, is very active in this area. I guess closest to this, we're building in Brambleton on lots we're purchasing from a developer up there.
Great. And so you're talking about your experience, and I'm hearing you talk about really big projects and things like that. You know, obviously we are not a big, huge project. We like to think that there might be some potential here. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you have some real experience that I think is relevant to our situation. Perhaps not exactly, but the reason why you rose to high on the list of potential candidates was the work that you did at Hillwood. And for those folks who don't know what that is, and you guys can describe it in more detail, Hillwood was an older condominium association that had a lot of infrastructure problems and needed to raise money. And you guys got involved, and can you just share with the group a little bit about what you did and, you know, what you ended up doing for them? Because I think that that's kind of relevant to our potential project.
And yeah, that's a really great question, so much as I wasn't exactly the person who did this work, but what they did is they took a community of like 160 separate owners, and it took them 3 years, and they kind of pulled the assemblage together, got all 160 owners to sell, and then literally sold it to a developer for twice what the property was assessed at. So you had all these folks that owned condos in the 200, 220 range, and they all got 450. So, you know, now it's a brand new apartment complex. Again, it took 3 years, and I will tell you, assemblages make you old before your time. They're horrible. Because it's really hard to get a lot of people to agree what color the sky is. And, you know, that being said, the 1 + 1 = 3. And that's whether it's y'all's condo, the whole association. We're not talking about selling the whole association right now, as I understand, but going forward, you know, if you ever do think about selling the whole thing, everyone together is stronger and worth more than people in parts.
Right, and we have had this conversation in the community, and I mentioned this on the phone, but we are not talking about trying to get the whole community to sell out, because a lot of our folks, you know, are older, they've been very long-term owners, and, you know, if they sold out, where would they go? You know, the economics are not such that you really would get so much more that they then could afford to move somewhere else. So we kind of don't think that that is what the community, and for us to do this, as you probably know, the whole community, we have to have 66% of the voting members of the ownership of the community approve whatever it is that we bring to the community for a vote. So we do not think that 66 or more than 66% of the community would vote to sell the whole thing, and the economics aren't there. The zoning.
And we need 90 or 100% to sell to do the whole community.
To do the whole community.
66% of us can't vote to get rid of the others.
Right.
It's not viable. So.
And the economics really aren't there. I mean, there's, you know, we've got 153 units, you know, the math, according to the lawyers, is you could put up potentially 139 on the whole complex. You couldn't do anything else. You couldn't rezone it and put up some, you know, 1,000-unit tower to sell, you know, for everyone to sell out at $1 million each, and then you guys have so much, you know, it's so on. It just is the economics aren't there for that. So really what we're looking at is we're looking at if we have development rights, if I can call it that, across the entire 15 roughly acre parcel of an additional of probably, you know, a maximum of 139 units, and we have an open site, which is where the pool currently is. You know, could we do a development on that site? And the answer is yes. The 4 or 5 law firms we talked to all think that it would be attractive in the development community. So, what do we need? We need someone like you, potentially, to help us. So, could you tell us a little bit about, you know, our situation, what you've seen from what we sent you, what you saw when you went and looked at it? You know, sort of, what are some of your thoughts about our situation, and then we can morph that into how do you think you would be involved with us in the event that the community and the board chose to engage you. So can you just tell us a little bit about your thoughts about what we've got?
Well, you know, one start, I think that you guys did, which is really smart. You got to start with your covenants. I know that sounds really weird, but you know, as condo owners, each one of you owns a piece of all the common area. And you have to start to figure out, you know, what are the mechanics that allow you to sell or do something with any piece of your project in your community. And it sounds like you've done that and it's 66% or whatever. I went out there, beautiful piece of ground, and I'm always amazed at how well kept Reston is and how well kept compared to, I live in the city, so a lot of them work out places.
Reston Associates is very aggressive.
They are. So and, you know, the first thing obviously jumps out at is the grade and stuff like that. You know, if it were me, there's a couple things I would do to try to get your arms around not only the process and what you're really looking at, you know, what's the disturbance, but also how much money we're really talking about. I'd probably get your board and physically walk the site, including the parking lot, because it doesn't look like you need the entire parking lot if someone develops a pool. You know, that one little bay of parking right there. And I'd literally flag it or take spray paint and define exactly what land you want to slice off. And from there, I would have an engineer, you know, the way engineers plan stuff is this. You take a blank piece of paper, and then you start by drawing in all the constraints. So that's really like creating your canvas. You know, I put in the steep slopes, I put in the pond if there's a pond, or the bad soils or the rock. You know, I put it all on the page, and then I can see where is left for me to develop and how much space that is, and then look at the geometry of it. So I noticed there are a lot of comments in one of the previous meetings about trees and things like that.
Yes.
You know, part of that is, okay, which trees would have to come down? One thing, and I know you guys have dealt with this a lot, you know, sometimes you see a tree, you can't develop close to it because it turns out you develop on top of the roots, and so you have to figure that stuff out. I know Fairfax County is going to be big on that.
Well, and Reston is very specific about trees, and we've been through this before where we've had trees die, we have to replace them, and there are rules about the kinds and the types, and we've got some familiarity with that.
So, long story, I'd start by really defining what it is that you could possibly sell. Then I would go to an engineer or a planner. It's not a big ticket item, and I'd do some sort of basic plan. You know, for the Walsh Colucci thing, I'm sure they're correct. You can build up to 20 units per acre on that land. So if it's an acre and a half, you can go to 30 units. A lot of times, just building the number of units doesn't make it the most valuable. And in our market, the most valuable widget is a townhouse. The reason is, the pricing of townhouses has outpaced the pricing of other products when you look at the cost of construction, the cost of building, parking, things like that. So the easiest, cheapest, most bang for your buck thing is usually a townhouse. In this market, the base townhouse the dimension is about 20 feet wide by 40 feet deep.
How wide?
20 feet by 40, that's the base. So, you obviously have a bigger, as we get more urban, you see them smaller. This would probably be a great location for some skinnier ones. The skinniest ones you'll see in Virginia are 16 feet. In the city of Baltimore, they go down to 11 feet, 6 inches. That's why they have the wire. You don't have to worry about that. The 16-footers are challenging to park. We live in a place where if there's 2 people living there, they have 2 cars. That's our world right now. A 16-footer is not wide enough to put a 2-car garage. A 20-foot wide townhouse is only wide enough to put a 2-car garage if the garage is in the back. If the garage is in the front, you can't put a 2-car garage because you have to leave room for the front door. And then it doesn't leave enough room for the garage. So anyway, we figure out how much land you can plan, then we plan it, and there's a couple other products. I noticed the Walsh Collusion thing talked about 2/2s, and for those of you not familiar with that, what that is it's like a 2-story townhouse and then a 2-story townhouse on top of it. The downside of that product in the location where your pool is, 2/2s are big buildings. They tend to be, heck, that's a 50-foot tall building. That would dwarf everything around, and it would likely not be considered in the character of what the existing structures are. Towns, you know what? Towns are very easy to build, and you can make the outsides of them look like whatever you want. We can make them fit, or builders can make them fit in the character of what's already there. Also, because towns aren't as deep as some of those other products, it gives you a little bit more flexibility dealing with trees and other things. So anyway, I don't have a giant presentation and stuff for you. I visited the site, I went through it. Like I said, I think the start is figuring out what you can build on, and then what you can build, and what some of the choices are. And so the Walsh Collusion thing, and sorry if I step on any of your questions, the pricing that they gave in there is not close to anything in our modern homes. But they were two years ago, I think, was when they did it. So I'm not really going to throw stones at them.
But they may have overestimated the density a little bit, underestimated the values.
Yeah.
So it may
even out.
out.
So as long as you're introducing it, tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are about value. What do you sort of just, we're not
I'm sorry, can I interrupt real quick? Before we go there, can we talk a little bit more about the density? I think there's a little disconnect here in what Walsh Lucy has told us and kind of where we're at. Our understanding is that if we viewed it, if you logically think of it as an extension of Vantage Hill, i.e. you're not selling a piece of property and splitting it so it only has a density assigned to that 1 acre, but in fact our common 15 acres has, as we understand it by right, an additional 139 units on that land. Okay.
But could you get them?
Well, of course, but that's very different from viewing it as you can only put 20 or 30 units depending on the size of that physical piece of property. Right? Those are, at some level, 2 different things. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that before we go to the value thing.
Yeah, the limiting factor is really going to be the density you can put on the property in this case, as opposed to the total density. Because you're right,
correct.
You could build, you can't fit it all out there.
Right. Clearly you can't put 140 units on that piece of land. Well, maybe you could, but nobody would want it.
Yeah.
But
we would never get a vote for it.
right, correct.
Okay.
So it's possible that if it was an extension of our current campus, which it is, and not carved off and sold individually, you know, the density would be higher on that particular site than 20 or 30.
It's still dependent on what you can physically
Right.
get on the site without having impacts on the neighbors.
So it's a technical difference, but let me give you an example. So I did a project in Huntington, and I bought 30 old houses, knocked them down, and built townhouses. Right near those high towers, pretty close to Huntington Metro. And there were a couple holdouts who didn't want to sell. Fine. So we rezoned the property and started building it, and living in a construction zone sucks. So eventually people said, okay, we'll sell it. And I said, well, I already rezoned it. I don't want your land anymore, because what am I going to do with it? I have to build in setbacks and other things. It's not part of the project. So I went back and thought about it, and the solution I came up with is I rezoned my whole property again and included that, because then I could take credit for different open spaces, and I could get more houses out of that one lot that was there. In y'all's case, you're not really rezoning this. You're going through the PRC process, which is like a rezoning, but not really a rezoning. So if you just lop off an acre and a half, that's kind of one answer. If you view it as an extension of your existing project, it's a slightly different answer.
Right, and we had one of the things that started us on this path is Bill Lauer, God rest his soul, of Tetra Partners, had a relationship with some members of the board and came in and did a presentation for us one night. And we got a lot of details from him about his thoughts about how a developer would think about the site. So yeah, we understand that there's different ways of thinking about it, and I think potentially one of the things that we as a community would want is we want some developers to come in and give us some ideas. So as an owner's rep, you're saying, well, gee, you've got to be prepared, it could be this, but some developers might be more aggressive and more willing to try to do something else, I would think. Do you think that that's possible, given the economics of it?
Yes, lately we've seen some slightly more original products here in the Washington area, which we haven't seen actually these folks think they're original. People did it here 35 years ago, where they built a podium and then built units on top of the podium. It's really not that original. But it does allow you to build a lot of density in a small area.
And that's what he talked to us about, was a podium structure.
Bill was a good man. I like him. And it takes care of your parking. And it's a great way to drive or to get more density in small ways.
Do they know what a podium is? It's like a concrete parking garage, and it stops at ground level. You actually bring it right up to the street level, and then you build from there on with the standard.
So basically, what currently is the pool, and what currently is the pool house, would all be parking.
Right.
And then above that would be the units.
Right, which would look like townhouses on dirt, kind of, I mean, you could landscape it and everything else.
Yeah, you kind of build a little plaza in there and stuff. So, that's one product thing. Now, the downside of a product like that is the cost of building that podium is high. That's expensive. And to the extent that the costs of building something are higher, that takes money away from the land value.
How many units would you be able to put in a podium structure?
I don't know. But I say I don't know because I don't know how big of a land area we're really talking about. Now, if you think of the geometry of blocks, about the most towns I can get in an acre is about 20. And that's if everything lines up perfectly. And by perfectly, I mean we got a house then I have a driveway aisle, and then I have another house. And you know, perfect dimension. If this driveway aisle happens to be too wide, then it's not as efficient, it's wasted land, and I'm not gonna get to 20. You know.
But you're not talking about a platform.
You are talking about a platform. It's,
Well,
you know, think of it as I'm building like this, and I'm going to build on top of the notebook,
Right.
kind of thing. And underneath the notebook is parking. But then the townhouses won't have garages because they'll be
Underneath.
parked underneath. Yeah. So that's expensive to build, and that, like I said, takes away from the value of the land. If that makes sense. 2/2s are also expensive to build. You know, Tom, actually, you made a good point earlier when we were talking about this. Because of the grade, building stacked towns or of a town in town, this lower unit is kind of screwy because part of it is literally under, kind of below grade a little bit. It would be a unique product and also very expensive to build. That's why I usually keep coming back to towns or some version of it.
So you keep on using this phrase, and I'm just curious, when you say expensive to build, when it's expensive to build, what are you talking about for a building cost? I'm not talking about land value, I'm not talking about soft costs or anything else. I'm talking about actual pouring the concrete, putting the stick up, getting it to finish, and so on and so forth. You know, are we talking 200 a foot? A square foot? Are we talking 150 a square foot to build it? What are you talking about when you say it's really expensive?
So the variables, when you're thinking about building costs, a lot of it is who's doing the building. So if NVR, we all know NVR, if they're building it, they can build that townhouse for $52 a foot. Because all the pieces of that townhouse, they're building them in a factory and they're just assembling them. You know, Michael Harris Homes or Madison Homes, you may know those guys. It costs them $100 a foot to build the same thing, a little less. But that's how big of a fluctuation it is between a pure production builder and a more custom builder. You know, if you had a national builder or a larger builder, this kind of product where it doesn't need to be stone and super expensive materials, you're probably in the $60 to $65 a foot range. What do you think?
something like that. But again, what that assumes, if you're going to an efficient production line type builder, is that your layout is not, contorted. It's got to be, simple. That's what an engineer kind of has to look at. And then to answer your other question on the podium, a parking space it's not a very big or efficient site. So, $15,000 something like that a space, 10 to 15 space.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal dimension for that parking is 120 feet by 180 feet. And that gets you car, travel aisle, car,